Imagine waking up tomorrow with nothing scheduled. No alarm, no commute, no emails piling up overnight, no meetings, no deadlines, no notifications buzzing every few minutes demanding your attention. No boss expecting you at a specific minute. No traffic to sit in. No packed lunch to prepare while half asleep. No rushing. Just the day, stretching out ahead of you like an open field. Now imagine that's not a vacation. That's not a sick day or a holiday or some rare weekend where nothing came up. Imagine that's just Tuesday. Imagine that's most days. Strange as it sounds, that might be closer to how your ancestors actually lived than the life you're living right now. We have this image of medieval peasants burned into our minds. Dirty, miserable, worked to the bone from sunrise to sunset. Oppressed by cruel lords. Starving half the time. Dying young in muddy hovels while rats gnawed at their feet. Life before the modern age, we're told, was nasty, brutish, and short. Just survival. Just suffering. Just waiting to die of plague or famine or some infected wound that would be nothing today. That's the picture, right? Except it's mostly wrong. The actual evidence, from court records, from church documents, from agricultural studies, from the bones and teeth of the people themselves, tells a very different story. Medieval peasants weren't living some endless nightmare. They were living. They had festivals that lasted for days. They had ale and music and dancing. They had communities so tight that everyone knew everyone's business, for better and worse. They had rest. In fact, here's something that might genuinely shock you. A medieval peasant in England probably had more days off per year than you do. That's not a joke. That's not romanticizing the past. That's what the records show. Between Sundays, saints' days, and church holidays, a typical peasant in the 14th century might have had somewhere between 150 and 180 days per year when they weren't expected to work. Some estimates go even higher. Compare that to the modern American worker, who averages around 120 days off including weekends and holidays, and often doesn't actually take all of them. The medieval peasant worked hard. Brutally hard sometimes, especially during planting and harvest. But they also rested. They had time that wasn't claimed by anyone. Time to sit. Time to talk. Time to simply exist without a schedule pressing down on them. So what did they actually do with all that time? What did an ordinary day look like for someone living in, say, 1350? Not a dramatic day with a battle or a plague outbreak or a visit from the king. Just a normal day. A quiet day. The kind of day that happened thousands of times and was never recorded because nothing remarkable happened, except a human being lived it. That's what we're going to walk through together tonight. We'll start before dawn, when the first grey light crept into a small cottage and the day began without any alarm except the light itself. We'll follow a peasant through morning chores, through work in the fields, through the midday meal that was more important than you might think. We'll watch them rest, talk, laugh, argue, pray. We'll see what they ate, what they wore, what they believed, what they feared, what they loved. And somewhere along the way, you might start to notice something uncomfortable. You might start to wonder whether progress always means what we think it means. Whether having more stuff and more technology automatically translates to having a better life. Whether your medieval ancestors, for all their hardships, understood something about time and rest and community that we've somehow forgotten. But that's getting ahead of ourselves. For now, it's still dark. A cold morning somewhere in medieval England. The fire burned down to embers hours ago. The rooster hasn't crowed yet, but it will soon. And in a small cottage at the edge of the village, someone is about to wake up and start another ordinary, extraordinary day. Let's begin there. You're not waking up to an alarm. There are no alarms. There's no clock on the wall, no church bell yet. That comes later. There's just the slow, almost imperceptible shift from black to gray as the sky outside begins to lighten. The first thing you notice is the cold. Not the sharp, dangerous cold of deep winter. If it were that cold, you'd have banked the fire more carefully last night, piled on more bodies, maybe brought the animals closer. This is the ordinary cold of an English morning in late spring or early autumn. The kind that makes you pull your knees up tighter, press closer to the warm body beside you. Resist the idea of leaving the place where you've been sleeping. You're lying on a straw mattress. Not a bed in the modern sense. There's no frame, no box spring, no memory foam. Just a large linen sack stuffed with straw or dried rushes, laid directly on the packed earth floor or maybe on a low wooden platform if your family has done well enough to build one. The straw compresses over time, gets lumpy, starts to smell. Every few months you'll empty it out, burn the old straw, and stuff it fresh. For now, it's good enough. It's what you've slept on your entire life. It's what your parents slept on, and their parents before them. The second thing you notice is the smell. Smoke. Always smoke. The fire in the center of the cottage never fully goes out if someone's paying attention. And even when it dies down to embers, the smell lingers in everything. The thatch above you, the walls, your clothes, your hair, your skin. You don't notice it most of the time, the same way you don't notice the smell of your own home. But it's there, baked into every surface. Mixed with the smoke is the smell of bodies. Unwashed, because no one bathes the way you might think of bathing. Not daily, not even weekly, though people did wash their hands and faces more than the stereotypes suggest. It's not a bad smell exactly, just human. The smell of people who work hard and sleep close together and don't have running water or soap as daily luxuries. And underneath that, the smell of animals. Because you might not be alone in this cottage. In many peasant homes, especially in colder months, livestock lived under the same roof as the family. Not in the same room exactly. There might be a partition, a half wall, a separate section at one end of the building, but close enough that you can hear them breathing, shuffling, occasionally lowing or bleating in the darkness. A cow, maybe, a few sheep, some chickens roosting in the rafters or in a corner. A pig if you're fortunate enough to have one. This sounds primitive to modern ears, maybe even disgusting, but it was practical. Animals generate heat, significant heat. A single cow produces as much warmth as a small space heater. In a world without central heating, without insulation, without double-paned windows, that warmth was valuable. It could mean the difference between a miserable night and a tolerable one. So you shared your space with creatures, and you didn't think much of it, because everyone did. The cottage itself is small by modern standards. One room, maybe two if you're relatively prosperous. The walls are made of wattle and daub, a lattice of wooden strips woven together and plastered with a mixture of mud, clay, straw, and animal dung. It sounds crude, but it works. The walls keep out wind and rain reasonably well. They can be patched when they crack. They are made from materials that cost nothing but labor. The roof is thatch, bundles of dried reeds or straw piled thick and steep so rain runs off rather than soaking through. A good thatch roof can last 20 or 30 years if it's maintained. It's also home to mice, insects, and occasionally birds. Things fall from the ceiling sometimes. You learn not to sleep directly under certain spots. There are no windows in the modern sense. Maybe one or two small openings in the walls, covered with wooden shutters that can be closed against cold or rain. No glass. Glass windows are for churches and manor houses, not peasant cottages. When the shutters are open, light comes in. When they're closed, you live by firelight and whatever seeps through the cracks. The floor is packed earth. Hard, smooth, swept regularly. Some families scatter rushes or straw on the floor for insulation and to absorb dirt. replacing it when it gets too filthy. Others just live with the bare ground. Either way, you don't spend much time thinking about it. It's just the floor. It's what floors are. Now the light is growing stronger. Gray is becoming pale gold at the edges. Someone stirs beside you. Your wife, probably, or your husband, or one of the children wedged between you for warmth. In peasant households, privacy barely existed as a concept. Families slept together, often in the same bed or the same pile of straw and blankets. Children, parents, sometimes elderly relatives or unmarried siblings. You learned to sleep through noise, through movement, through the ordinary nighttime sounds of people living in very close quarters. One of the children coughs. Someone shifts, mutters something unintelligible, settles back into sleep. But you're awake now, and once you're awake, there's no real going back. The day has begun whether you're ready for it or not. You lie there for a moment longer, not because you're lazy, but because there's no rush. This is important to understand. The entire concept of being late doesn't exist in the way you know it. There's no time clock to punch, no shift that starts at a specific minute. The day is shaped by light and seasons and tasks, not by hours and schedules. The sun is barely up. The work will wait until you're ready, so you take a few more breaths. You feel the warmth of the body beside you. You listen to the sounds of the cottage coming alive, the fire being stirred by whoever woke first, the animals shifting in their section, a baby fussing and then quieting as someone nurses it back to sleep. This is the texture of waking up in medieval England. No sudden jarring into consciousness. No panic about being late. Just the slow, natural return to awareness guided by light and bodies and the ancient rhythms that governed human life for centuries before anyone thought to divide the day into hours and minutes and seconds. Eventually, reluctantly, you push back the blanket, rough wool, probably, scratchy but warm, and swing your legs over the side of the bed. The floor is cold against your bare feet. You slept in your clothes, or most of them. A long linen shirt that serves as both underwear and nightwear. Maybe a tunic over that if the night was cold. Undressing completely for bed is a luxury most peasants didn't bother with, especially in winter. Someone has gotten the fire going properly now. The flames are still small, but they're real flames, not just embers. The smoke rises toward the hole in the roof. There's no chimney in most peasant cottages, just an opening in the thatch where smoke is supposed to escape. It doesn't always work perfectly. The cottage fills with haze sometimes, especially when the wind is wrong. Your eyes sting, your throat scratches, but you're used to it. This is just what houses are like. You stand, stretch, work out the stiffness that comes from sleeping on straw. Your back aches a little. Your knees protest. You're not old, but you're not young either. Hard labor ages bodies faster than office work. 35 feels different when you've been doing physical work since childhood. First things first. You step outside to relieve yourself. There's no bathroom, no outhouse in the modern sense. Some villages have a communal privy pit. Many families just have a spot behind the cottage, a designated area away from the well and the garden where waste goes. You do what you need to do quickly, because it's cold out here and the day hasn't warmed up yet. While you're outside, you take a moment to read the morning. The sky is clear, mostly. A few clouds on the horizon, but nothing that looks threatening. The wind is coming from the west, which usually means fair weather. You check the garden, a small plot beside the cottage where the family grows vegetables, herbs, maybe some beans or peas. Everything looks fine. No frost damage, no animals got in during the night. You look toward the fields beyond the village. These aren't your fields, not exactly. The land belongs to the lord of the manor, but you farm it, you and everyone else in the village, in a system that's been working more or less the same way for centuries. You can see other cottages now, smoke rising from their roofs. Other people are waking up, starting their days. The village is coming alive. A dog barks somewhere. A rooster finally crows, late to his job. Somewhere a woman is calling to her children. Somewhere a man is coughing, deep and rough. The cough of someone who's breathed smoke his whole life. You take one more breath of the cold morning air, and then you turn and go back inside. The day has begun. Back inside, the cottage is warming up. The fire is burning properly now, and someone, your wife, probably, is already busy with the first task of the day. Breakfast. Except breakfast isn't what you think. There's no table spread with eggs and bacon and toast. No porridge bubbling on a stove. In medieval England, most peasants didn't eat breakfast in the formal sense. The concept of 3 meals a day at set times is more modern than you'd expect. For many working people in the medieval period, the pattern was different. A light something in the morning, if anything at all, a main meal around midday, and perhaps something smaller in the evening. What you might have in the morning is bread. A chunk of dark, dense bread made from rye or barley or a mixture of whatever grains were available. Wheat bread is for wealthy people, for lords and merchants. Peasant bread is coarser, heavier, sometimes gritty from the millstones that ground the flour. But it's filling, and it keeps reasonably well for several days. You tear off a piece and chew it slowly. The bread is a few days old now, hard enough that you have to work at it. Some people dip old bread in ale or water to soften it. Some just power through with strong teeth and jaw muscles built from a lifetime of eating food that required actual chewing. With the bread, maybe some ale. Not beer. Beer with hops came later. Ale is simpler. Fermented grain, mildly alcoholic, cloudy and thick. It sounds strange to drink alcohol in the morning, but ale was a staple beverage for everyone, including children. The water wasn't always safe. Wells could be contaminated, streams could carry disease, and no one understood germ theory. But the brewing process killed most of the dangerous organisms. Ale was safer than water, and it provided calories too. So you drink your morning ale, chew your hard bread, and that's breakfast. 5 minutes, maybe less. Your stomach isn't full, but it's not empty either. You have enough fuel to start working. Around you, the household is stirring into activity. The children are awake now, all of them. How many depends on the family, but peasant households tended to be large by modern standards. Not because people planned it that way, but because children kept coming and enough of them survived to fill the cottage. 5 children, 6, 7. Some families had more. Many of those children wouldn't make it to adulthood. Infant mortality was brutal, and childhood diseases that are minor inconveniences today were killers then. But the ones who survived were put to work early. Even the youngest children have jobs. A 5-year-old can scatter grain for chickens. A 7-year-old can fetch water from the well. A 10-year-old can do real work, tending animals, weeding the garden, helping with dozens of small tasks that keep a household running. Childhood as a protected time of pure play and education is a modern luxury. Medieval children were small workers, learning by doing, contributing to the family's survival as soon as they were physically able. Your wife is coordinating all of this without appearing to. She's not barking orders. The household runs on routine, on everyone knowing what needs to be done and doing it. She might be nursing the baby while simultaneously telling one child to check on the chickens and another to fetch more firewood. She might be starting the bread for tomorrow, because bread takes time, and if you don't start it today, you won't have it when you need it. Bread making is constant work. The dough has to be mixed, kneaded, left to rise, shaped, and baked. In many villages, peasants didn't bake their own bread at home. They made the dough and then brought it to a communal oven, often owned by the lord of the manor, where they paid a fee to use it. This was one of the many small ways the feudal system extracted value from peasant labor. You grew the grain, you ground it into flour at the lord's mill for a fee, you baked it in the lord's oven for another fee. At every step, someone above you took a cut. But that's later in the day, if today is a baking day. Right now, there are animals to tend. You step out again, this time heading for the small structure beside or behind your cottage where you keep your livestock. Not everyone has animals. The poorest peasants might have nothing but a few chickens. But a typical peasant family with some land probably has a cow for milk, maybe an ox for plowing if they're more prosperous, a few sheep for wool, a pig being fattened for slaughter, chickens for eggs, and perhaps a goat or two. These animals are wealth. Not abstract wealth like numbers in a bank account, but real, tangible, breathing wealth. A cow represents years of saving, careful breeding, good luck. If your cow dies, your family's situation becomes significantly more precarious. So you take care of her. Every day, without fail, the cow needs to be milked. This is usually women's work, but the division isn't absolute. Everyone does what needs doing. Milking is a skill, a rhythm of hands and pressure that you learned as a child and could probably do half asleep. The milk streams into a wooden bucket, warm and frothing slightly. This milk will be drunk fresh by the children, or left to separate so the cream can be skimmed for butter, or processed into cheese that will last through the winter when the cow stops producing. The other animals need attention too. The sheep need to be let out of their pen to graze. Someone needs to check that none of them are injured or sick. The pig needs feeding. Pigs are the recyclers of the medieval world, eating scraps and waste and anything else they can find, converting it into bacon and ham and lard. The chickens need grain scattered, and someone needs to collect any eggs from the night. All of this takes time. An hour, maybe more. It doesn't feel like drudgery because it's just life. These are your animals. You know them individually, know their personalities and quirks and habits. The cow that always tries to kick the bucket over. The sheep that wanders too far if you don't watch her. The pig that's clever enough to escape from poorly maintained fences. Caring for them is work, but it's also relationship. While the animals are being tended, other morning tasks are happening around the village. Someone is drawing water from the well, a deep bucket lowered on a rope, hauled back up full and heavy, carried back to the cottage. This is hard work, and it has to be done every day, sometimes multiple times. A family might need several gallons of water daily for drinking, cooking, cleaning, and animals. Someone else is gathering firewood. The fire never stops needing fuel, and fuel never stops needing to be gathered. In theory, peasants had rights to collect fallen wood from the forests and common lands. In practice, these rights were often restricted and contested. Taking the wrong wood from the wrong place could get you in serious trouble with the manor court. So you gathered carefully, legally, knowing exactly what you were and weren't allowed to take. The children who aren't doing specific chores are probably playing, but their play looks different from modern children's play. There are no toys in the manufactured sense. A ball might be a stuffed leather pouch or a pig's bladder inflated and tied off. Dolls might be roughly carved wood or bundled rags. But children don't need elaborate toys to play. They need space, time, and other children. Medieval villages had all three. The games they play are old games: running, chasing, hiding, play fighting with sticks, imitating adult work, pretending to plow, to cook, to hunt. Through play, they're learning the movements and rhythms they'll need when the pretending becomes real. A boy play fighting with a stick is training muscles he'll use when he swings a scythe. A girl pretending to cook is learning sequences she'll follow when she's actually responsible for feeding a family. Now the sun is fully up. The morning chill is fading. The village is completely awake, smoke rising from every cottage, people moving between buildings, voices calling out greetings or instructions or gossip. The sounds of animals, the sounds of work beginning, the sounds of a community starting another day. And this is where the nature of your work depends on what day it is, what season it is, and what your specific obligations are. Because here's something crucial to understand. A medieval peasant didn't have a single job. You weren't a farmer in the way someone today might be a farmer, doing farm work and nothing but farm work every day. You were a peasant, which meant you did whatever needed doing whenever it needed doing, and what needed doing changed constantly. In spring, you plowed and planted. In summer, you weeded and maintained and made hay. In autumn, you harvested. In winter, you repaired tools, processed stored food, did indoor work, and tried to stay warm. Layered on top of this agricultural cycle were your obligations to the Lord. Days when you had to work his land instead of your own. Tasks you owed as part of your tenancy. Today, let's say, is an ordinary day in early summer. The planting is done. The harvest is months away. The most urgent work is maintenance. Checking on the growing crops, weeding, repairing fences, tending to the endless small tasks that keep a farm functioning. You gather your tools. A hoe? Probably. A simple wooden handle with an iron blade. Maybe a rake. A sickle hanging from your belt for cutting weeds or grass. These tools are precious. Iron is expensive, and a peasant family might own only a few iron implements. You take care of them, sharpen them, repair the handles when they crack. A good tool, well maintained, might last a lifetime and be passed down to your children. You step out of the cottage and head toward the fields. The village opens up around you. Medieval villages weren't random scatterings of houses. They were organized, often along a single main street or clustered around a central green. Your cottage is one of maybe 20 or 30 or 50, depending on the size of the village. You know everyone who lives in each one. You know their names, their histories, their feuds, their alliances. You know who can be trusted and who can't, who works hard and who shirks, who's kind and who's cruel. As you walk, you exchange greetings. A nod to the blacksmith, already at work at his forge, the sound of hammer on metal ringing across the village. A wave to the old woman who lives alone since her husband died, still managing somehow on the charity of neighbors and her small garden. A few words with another man heading the same direction you are, toward the fields, comparing notes on the weather, the crops, the small news of village life. This is your commute. A walk of maybe 10 or 15 minutes from your cottage to the strips of land you farm. No traffic, no trains, no rush. Just your feet on a dirt path worn smooth by generations of feet before yours. The fields come into view, and here's where the landscape looks strange to modern eyes. There are no neat rectangular farms with fences marking where one property ends and another begins. Instead, you see a vast open expanse divided into long, narrow strips. These strips are scattered across the landscape, intermingled with strips belonging to other families. Your land isn't one contiguous block. It's a dozen different pieces spread across the village's territory. This system, called open field farming, seems inefficient. Why not just give each family one solid piece of land? But there's logic to it. Different parts of the landscape have different qualities. Some soil is richer, some drier, some better for certain crops. By scattering strips across the territory, every family gets a mix of good land and less good land. It's a form of insurance, spreading risk across the community. You find your way to the strip you'll be working today. The crop is coming up nicely, wheat, probably, or barley or rye, the staple grains that will become bread and ale. But so are the weeds. There are always weeds. They never stop coming, never give up, never take a season off. Your job today is to remove as many as you can, giving the grain more space, more sunlight, more nutrients. You bend down, hoe in hand, and begin to work. This is physical labor. Real, honest, exhausting physical labor. Your back will ache tonight. Your hands, already calloused from years of work, will still be sore. Sweat will soak through your clothes long before midday. There's no air conditioning, no ergonomic equipment, no breaks mandated by labor law. But there's also no boss standing over you with a stopwatch. No productivity metrics. No emails interrupting you every few minutes. Just you, the soil, the weeds, the sky, and the slow rhythm of work that humans have been doing for thousands of years. Around you, other villagers are doing the same thing. Some are working their own strips. Some are fulfilling their labor obligations to the Lord, working his domain land as required by their tenancy. You can hear voices carrying across the fields, conversations, jokes, complaints, songs. People work near each other, and that proximity makes the work more bearable. Sometimes someone starts singing, and others join in. Work songs, harvest songs, songs that have been passed down for generations. The rhythm of the song matches the rhythm of the work, makes the repetitive motion easier to sustain. This is the original technology for making labor tolerable, not podcasts or music streaming, but human voices rising together over the fields. The sun climbs higher. The morning passes. Your stomach starts to remind you that the bread and ale from hours ago weren't much of a meal. But that's all right. Midday is coming, and midday means the main meal of the day. The sun is high now, almost directly overhead. The shadows have shrunk to small dark pools at your feet. The morning's chill is a distant memory. Now it's warm, properly warm, and the sweat is running freely down your back, soaking through your linen shirt. Around you, the rhythm of work is slowing. People are straightening up, stretching, looking toward the village. No one has announced anything. There's no bell, no whistle, no official signal. But everyone knows. It's time for dinner. Not lunch. Dinner. This is where medieval eating patterns confuse modern people. Today, dinner means the evening meal. But for most of human history, dinner meant the main meal of the day, and the main meal happened around midday. The word itself comes from the Old French disner, meaning to break one's fast. In medieval England, dinner was served sometime between late morning and early afternoon, and it was the biggest meal you'd eat. The logic was simple. You needed fuel for the day's work, and the day's work happened in daylight. Eating your largest meal in the evening, after the work was done, made less sense when there was no artificial light to extend the productive hours. So you ate hearty in the middle of the day, when you could actually use the energy, and ate lighter as darkness approached and activity wound down. You set down your hoe, wipe your forehead with the back of your hand, and start walking back toward the village. Others are doing the same, converging from different strips of land, different tasks, different corners of the fields. There's a loose, unhurried quality to the movement. No one is racing. The food will wait. Back at the cottage, things have been happening while you were away. Your wife has been preparing. The fire has been fed to a proper cooking heat. A pot has been hanging over it for hours, contents slowly simmering. The smell hits you before you even step inside. Something rich, something savory, something that makes your stomach clench with sudden, urgent hunger. Pottage. If there's one dish that defines medieval peasant food, it's pottage. Not a specific recipe, but a category, a thick stew or soup made from whatever was available, cooked slowly over a fire until everything merged into a hearty, filling mass. The base was usually water or broth, thickened with grains, oats, barley, sometimes breadcrumbs. Into this went whatever vegetables were in season or could be pulled from storage. Onions, leeks, cabbage, peas, beans, turnips, parsnips, whatever the garden had produced. If you were lucky, there was meat in the pottage. A bone with some scraps still clinging to it, saved from a previous meal and simmered until the marrow had given up its richness. A bit of salted pork or bacon, carefully hoarded. Maybe some organ meat, liver, kidney, heart. Parts that wealthier people disdained but that peasants knew were nutritious and flavorful. On good days, the pottage was thick with substance. On lean days, it was thinner, more water than food, but still warm and still filling. The pot never really emptied. That's something modern people find hard to understand. You didn't make a fresh batch of pottage each day. You kept adding to what was already there. New vegetables, new grains, new scraps of meat or bone. The pot simmered constantly, refreshed and renewed. A perpetual stew that might run for weeks or months before being cleaned out and started fresh. This sounds unsanitary to modern ears, but the constant heat killed bacteria. It was actually a fairly safe way to preserve and extend food. Your wife ladles the pottage into bowls. Not individual bowls for each person. That would require too many bowls. More likely a few large bowls shared among the family, everyone dipping in with wooden spoons or simply using bread to scoop. The bread serves double duty, utensil and food. You tear off a piece, use it to soak up the thick liquid, and eat both together. The taste is earthy. That's the honest word. Medieval food wasn't seasoned the way modern food is seasoned. Salt was expensive and used sparingly. Spices were luxuries entirely out of reach for peasants. Pepper, cinnamon, cloves, these might as well have been gold dust. What you had was the natural flavor of the ingredients, enhanced maybe with herbs that grew freely. Parsley, sage, thyme, garlic, onions. It doesn't taste bad. It tastes like food. Real food, grown in soil you know, prepared by hands you trust. The onions are sharp, the grains are nutty, the bit of bacon fat spreading through the broth adds richness. It's not exciting by modern standards, but after a morning of physical labor, it's exactly what your body needs. And there's bread, of course. That dark, dense bread we talked about before, rye and barley, heavy and chewy. Today it's relatively fresh, only a day or two old, still soft enough to tear easily. You eat more of it than you probably should, but bread is the foundation of the diet. Estimates suggest medieval peasants got somewhere between 70 and 80% of their calories from bread and other grain products. It was cheap, it was filling, it was available. To drink, there's ale. The same cloudy, mildly alcoholic ale from morning. Not strong enough to impair you for the afternoon's work, but enough to provide calories and, crucially, safe hydration. The children drink ale too, often a weaker version called small ale, brewed with less grain and fermented shorter so the alcohol content is negligible. How long does this meal last? Longer than you might think. The modern lunch break, 30 minutes, maybe an hour, eaten at a desk or standing at a counter, has no parallel here. Medieval dinner was a proper pause in the day. You didn't eat quickly and rush back to work. You ate, and then you rested. The meal might stretch across an hour or two, blending into a period of midday rest that was built into the rhythm of work. This wasn't laziness. This was survival strategy. Working through the hottest hours of the day is inefficient and dangerous. Heat exhaustion was as real then as it is now, and people without access to unlimited cold water and air conditioning learned to avoid it. The sensible pattern was to work in the cooler morning hours, break during the midday heat, then resume in the late afternoon when temperatures dropped. So after eating, people rested. Maybe you lie down on the straw mattress, still warm from the morning's bodies. Maybe you sit outside in whatever shade you can find, back against the cottage wall, eyes half closed. Maybe you talk quietly with your wife about household matters, what needs to be done this week, whether the children are well, what you've heard about the neighbor's sick cow. The children are drowsy too, the younger ones napping outright, the older ones engaged in quiet activities. Someone is mending a torn piece of clothing. Someone is playing with a wooden toy. Someone is simply sitting, doing nothing, watching the world. This period of rest might last an hour or more. Again, no clock is dictating the schedule. The work will resume when the sun has moved further west, when the worst of the heat has passed, when bodies feel ready to move again. Let's talk more about the food, because food shaped medieval life in ways that are hard to overstate. The diet was monotonous by modern standards. You ate the same basic foods day after day, week after week, with variation coming primarily from the seasons. Spring brought fresh greens after a winter of stored food. Summer meant fresh vegetables, fruits when they ripened, maybe some fresh cheese from the surplus milk. Autumn was harvest time, the brief abundance before the long scarcity of winter. And winter itself meant surviving on what had been preserved. Salted meat, dried fish, pickled vegetables, hard cheese, grain stored in barns. Meat was a luxury, eaten less frequently than you might assume. The church mandated fasting days, Wednesdays, Fridays, Saturdays, the 40 days of Lent, and various other holy days throughout the year. On fasting days, meat was forbidden. Fish was acceptable, which is why even landlocked villages maintained fish ponds or traded for dried and salted fish from coastal regions. Eggs and cheese were sometimes allowed, sometimes not, depending on the specific fast. Even on non-fasting days, meat wasn't always available. Animals were too valuable to slaughter casually. A pig was typically killed in late autumn, when it had been fattened on fallen acorns and when the cold weather would help preserve the meat. The resulting pork was salted, smoked, and carefully rationed through the winter and spring. A cow or an ox would almost never be killed for meat. They were worth more alive, producing milk or pulling plows. Chickens provided eggs, which were often more valuable than the bird itself. When meat did appear on the table, nothing was wasted. The blood was caught and used for blood pudding. The intestines were cleaned and stuffed to make sausages. The organs were eaten fresh or preserved. The bones were boiled for broth, then cracked for marrow, then sometimes ground for other uses. The hide was tanned for leather. The fat was rendered for cooking, for candles, for a dozen other purposes. A slaughtered animal was a gift, and every part of that gift was used. Dairy was more regular, at least for families with cows or goats. Fresh milk was drunk when available, but it didn't keep. Most milk was processed into butter or cheese, which could be stored for weeks or months. Cheese making was a skill, and different regions developed different styles based on local conditions and local preferences. A well-made cheese was compact nutrition, protein, fat, calories, in a form that traveled and lasted. Vegetables came from the garden beside the cottage. Peasant gardens were surprisingly diverse, growing whatever would grow in the local soil and climate. Onions and leeks were staples, providing flavor when little else could. Cabbages grew well in English weather and could be stored in a root cellar or pickled in brine. Peas and beans provided protein when meat was scarce. Root vegetables, turnips, parsnips, carrots, could be left in the ground until needed or stored through winter in cool, dark places. Fruit was seasonal and precious. Apples were the most common, growing reasonably well in England and storing reasonably well through autumn and into winter. Pears when you could get them. Berries in summer, strawberries, raspberries, blackberries, eaten fresh in the brief weeks when they were ripe. Preserved fruits were rare for peasants. Sugar was expensive and honey only slightly less so. Honey was the main sweetener when sweetener was available at all. Some villages kept bees, and honey was valuable enough to be a trade good, a medicine, and an ingredient in mead. But most peasant food wasn't sweet. The palate was calibrated to earthier flavors, the sharpness of onions, the blandness of grains, the salt of preserved meat, the sourness of ale. What about hunger? The honest answer is that hunger was a recurring feature of medieval peasant life. Not a constant crisis, but a periodic visitor. The weeks before harvest, when last year's stores were running low and this year's crops weren't ready yet, were called the hungry gap. If the previous harvest had been poor, if the winter had been harsh, if disease had struck the livestock, the hungry gap could become a hungry month, a hungry season. Real famine, mass starvation, was less common than popular imagination suggests, at least in normal years. The agricultural system, for all its inefficiencies, usually produced enough to feed the population. But localized food shortages happened regularly. A bad harvest in your village could mean hunger even if the next village over had plenty. And when broader famines did strike, crop failures across whole regions, cattle plagues, wars that disrupted agriculture, the death toll could be catastrophic. So medieval peasants had a complicated relationship with food. It was never far from their minds, never taken entirely for granted. They knew what hunger felt like. They knew the anxiety of watching storm clouds roll in during harvest season, the relief of a barn finally full, the careful calculations of winter stores. They ate simply because that was what was available. They ate everything because nothing could be wasted. And yet food was also celebration. The feast days that punctuated the calendar year were marked with special foods, extra portions, rare treats. Christmas, Easter, the local saint's day, harvest festivals. These were occasions when even peasants might eat meat, might drink stronger ale, might enjoy a bit of something sweet. The contrast with everyday austerity made these feasts genuinely joyful. You appreciated abundance because you knew scarcity. The meal is winding down now. The pottage pot is empty, or nearly so. What's left will be the base for tomorrow's batch. The bread has been eaten to the last crust. The ale jug is drained. Children are wiping their mouths, already drifting toward whatever activity will fill the early afternoon. You've been sitting for a while now, letting the food settle, letting the body rest. The urgent hunger from before is gone, replaced by a comfortable fullness. Not stuffed. Peasants rarely had the luxury of eating until stuffed, but satisfied. Enough. Enough to fuel the afternoon's work. Enough to quiet the belly until evening. The sun has moved noticeably since you sat down. The shadows are lengthening again, pointing east now as the day tips past its midpoint. The worst of the heat has passed, or is passing. The time for rest is ending. Someone stands, stretches. Someone else begins gathering the bowls, preparing to clean them. The children who will work in the afternoon are being rounded up, directed toward their tasks. The machinery of the household is shifting gears, moving from rest back toward labor. You stand too. Your body feels better than it did. Rested, fed, ready. The afternoon won't be as long as the morning. A few more hours of work, and then the day will begin its long, slow fade toward evening. You pick up your hoe from where you left it by the door. Time to head back to the fields. The walk back to the fields feels different now. Your body is heavier, slower, still processing the meal. But there's also a steadiness that wasn't there in the morning, when you were running on old bread and ale and not much else. The pottage has done its work. You have fuel for the hours ahead. The village looks different in the afternoon light. Shadows are falling the opposite direction now, the geometry reversed. The sounds are different too, less bustle, less urgency. The morning rush is over. People are moving at a measured pace, conserving energy, settling into the long rhythm that will carry them through until evening. You're not the only one heading back to the fields. Others are walking the same paths, carrying the same tools, wearing the same expression of resigned acceptance. This is just what the afternoon is. You've done it 1,000 times. You'll do it 1,000 more. But here's something important. The afternoon's work isn't necessarily the same as the morning's work. Medieval labor was varied in ways that modern jobs often aren't. You didn't clock in to repeat the same task for 8 hours. Different parts of the day called for different activities, and the afternoon might bring a shift in focus, from weeding to fence repair, from your own strips to the Lord's domain, from field work to cottage work. Today, let's say you're shifting tasks. The weeding will continue tomorrow and the day after and the day after that. Weeds don't respect schedules. But this afternoon, you've got something else that needs attention. The fence along the north edge of the common pasture is failing. You noticed it a few days ago, mentioned it to a neighbor, and the two of you agreed to fix it today. This is how village maintenance works. There's no municipal government sending repair crews. No property management company to call. When something breaks, the people who use it fix it. The common pasture is exactly what it sounds like. Land that belongs to everyone in the village, or more precisely, land where everyone in the village has rights to graze their animals. Your cow, when she's not being milked, spends her days on the common, eating the grass that belongs to no one and everyone. The pasture survives because villagers cooperate to maintain it, keeping the grass from being overgrazed, keeping the fences intact, keeping the whole system functioning. This is the commons, a concept that shaped medieval life in ways we've largely forgotten. Not everything was privately owned. The forest where you gathered firewood, the stream where you caught fish, the meadow where everyone cut hay, the pasture where animals grazed. These were shared resources, governed by complex rules that everyone understood. Who could graze how many animals? When hay could be cut and who got first choice? Which trees could be felled and which were protected? These weren't written laws in most cases. They were customs, traditions, agreements hammered out over generations and enforced by collective memory and social pressure. Break the rules, take more than your share, and you'd answer to the manor court, and worse, to your neighbors who depended on the commons too. The fence, then, isn't just your fence. It's everyone's fence. And fixing it is both obligation and investment. You meet your neighbor by the damaged section. He's already there, examining the problem. A few posts have rotted at the base and toppled. The woven branches between them, this style of fencing is called a wattle fence, have been trampled by animals who found the gap. Another few days of neglect and the damage would have spread. The two of you set to work. First, you need new posts. These are usually made from whatever wood is available. Oak if you can get it, ash, hazel, whatever straight and strong and not needed for something more important. You brought a few pieces that you'd cut and stored for exactly this purpose. Medieval peasants were always planning ahead, always stocking materials against future needs. Digging the post holes is the hard part. The soil is compacted, root-threaded, stubborn. You have an iron-tipped digging tool, basically a pointed bar that you drive into the ground and wiggle to loosen the earth. It's slow work. You take turns, one digging while the other rests. Sweat starts flowing again. The afternoon sun's still warm enough to make labor feel like labor. But here's the thing, you're not just working, you're talking. This is what modern productivity culture misses entirely. Medieval work was social. You worked alongside people, not in isolation. And when you worked alongside people, you talked. About everything. About nothing. Your neighbor is telling you about his wife's sister, who married badly and is now living in the next village with a man who drinks too much. You're telling him about your eldest son, who's getting old enough to think about marriage himself, and the challenge of finding a suitable family to marry into. He's heard a rumor that the Lord might raise the rents next year. You've heard that the priest is sick again and might not last the winter. This isn't idle gossip. Well, some of it is. But it's also information exchange, the medieval equivalent of checking your news feed and social media. In a world without newspapers, Without mass communication, news traveled person to person, conversation to conversation. The network of village gossip was how you learned what was happening in the world beyond your immediate view. And it wasn't just information. It was social bonding. Working together, talking together, sharing complaints and jokes and observations. This was how relationships were maintained. By the time the fence is repaired, you and your neighbor have reinforced something more important than wooden posts. You've reinforced the trust that makes village life possible. The new posts are in. Now comes the wattle work. Wattle fencing is made by weaving flexible branches, usually hazel or willow, between upright stakes. It's like basket weaving on a large scale. The technique is ancient, going back thousands of years, and it works remarkably well. A properly made wattle fence is strong, flexible, and relatively quick to construct. Your neighbor's wife has joined you now, bringing water and offering to help with the weaving. Children are there too, his and yours, some helping, some watching, some playing in the grass nearby. The work has become a small social gathering, a neighborhood project. The weaving is rhythmic, almost meditative. Take a branch, thread it over one stake, under the next, over the next, under the next. Pull it tight. Take another branch. Repeat. The pattern builds, layer by layer, until the fence is solid. As you work, you think about how much of medieval life was like this. Not isolated labor, but communal effort. Not individual achievement, but collective maintenance. The village survived because people did things together. Raised barns together. Harvested together. Celebrated together. Mourned together. The fence is finished. It's not beautiful. There's no time for beautiful, but it's solid. The animals won't get through. The common pasture is secure for another season. You step back, survey the work, exchange nods with your neighbor. No formal thanks are needed. He'll need your help with something soon enough, and you'll give it. And the informal accounting that governs village relationships will balance out over time. The afternoon is more than half gone now. The sun has dropped noticeably toward the western horizon. The light is turning golden, the shadows stretching long. Evening is still a few hours away, but the day is beginning its slow descent. You have a choice now. There's always more work, but the urgent tasks are done. The weeding can wait until tomorrow. The fence is fixed. The animals have been tended. You could go back to the cottage and help with whatever needs doing there. You could find another task in the fields. You could check on your strips one more time before night falls. Or you could stop. This is the part that's hardest for modern people to understand. The work in a medieval village was never truly finished, but that didn't mean you worked every available hour. There was a rhythm to it, a natural stopping point that came when the body was tired and the urgent tasks were done. The remaining daylight wasn't time you had to fill. It was time you could fill, if you chose or not. Many peasants chose not. The late afternoon, in good weather and good seasons, was often a time of relative leisure. Not idleness, the distinction matters. You might be doing something useful, mending a tool, preparing materials for tomorrow, teaching a skill to a child. But you weren't grinding yourself down to the last minute of daylight. This was especially true after the main planting was done and before the harvest began. The long summer days offered more hours of light than the work strictly required. People used those hours for themselves. You decide to head back to the cottage. The afternoon's labor is enough. Your body has done what it needed to do. On the way, you pass the village green, the open space at the center of the settlement where people gather. A few old men are sitting there, talking, watching the children play. An old woman is spinning wool, her fingers working automatically while her eyes track the activity around her. A young mother is nursing a baby in the shade of a tree. This is what the village looks like in the in-between hours. Not frantic activity, not complete rest, but something in the middle. People existing together, filling time in small ways, being present with each other. The children's game has gotten louder. Someone is chasing someone else, and the chase has become a chase of 3, then 5, then 8 kids running in loops around the green, shrieking with the pure joy of movement. The old men watch with expressions that might be amusement, might be memory. You stop for a moment, just watching. This is your village. These are your people. You've known most of them your entire life, and they've known you. The bonds are so familiar that you don't think about them most of the time. But in moments like this, in the golden light of a summer afternoon, you feel them. The web of relationships that holds everything together. Then you continue on toward home. The cottage comes into view. Smoke rising from the roof. The fire kept alive, as always. A chicken wandering in the yard. Your wife is outside, doing something with a basket of wool, carding it, maybe preparing it for spinning. She looks up as you approach, nods, returns to her work. This isn't coldness. It's just familiarity. You don't need grand greetings when you see each other multiple times a day, every day, for years on end. The nod says everything that needs saying. You're home. She sees you. Life continues. You find a spot near the cottage, in the shade, and sit down. The afternoon isn't over, but your work in it is. There's still time before the evening meal, before the darkness falls, before sleep claims another day. Time to rest, time to think, time to simply exist, without a task demanding your attention, without a schedule pressing you forward. You lean back against the cottage wall, feel the rough wattle and daub against your shoulders. Close your eyes. Listen to the sounds of the village settling into its late afternoon rhythm. A dog barking, a child laughing, the distant clang of the blacksmith's hammer, a cow lowing somewhere in the common pasture. This is the texture of life. Not the dramatic moments, not the crises, but the ordinary hours that make up most of a human existence. Hours that modern life has largely eliminated, paved over with productivity and entertainment and the endless scroll of distraction. Your ancestors knew something we've forgotten. They knew how to stop. The sun is lower now, hanging above the western hills like it's taking its time deciding whether to set. The light has gone from gold to amber, and the shadows have grown so long they're starting to merge into each other. The heat of the day is fading, and there's a softness in the air that feels like permission. Permission to stop working. Permission to rest. Permission to do something that isn't survival. You're still sitting against the cottage wall, half drowsing, when you hear it. Someone is playing music. It's faint at first, a pipe, maybe, or a simple wooden flute. The notes are wandering, not quite a melody, more like someone thinking out loud in sound. Then another instrument joins in. A drum, just a simple handheld thing, beating a lazy rhythm. And then a voice, a woman's voice, singing something old, something everyone knows. The music is coming from the village green. You stand, stretch, feel your joints protest mildly from the day's labor. Your wife looks up from her wool work. She's heard it too. Without discussion, you both start walking toward the sound. One of the children runs past, already ahead of you, drawn by the same invisible pull. This is how it happens. No announcement, no formal gathering, no scheduled event. Someone starts playing, and people drift toward the music like iron filings toward a magnet. It's been this way for as long as anyone can remember. By the time you reach the green, a small crowd has already formed. Not the whole village. Some people have other things to do, other places to be. But enough. 20 people, 30, sitting on the grass or standing in loose clusters, listening, talking, watching. The musician is a young man, barely more than a boy, who's been learning the pipe from his father. He's not particularly skilled yet, but no one minds. Music in a medieval village isn't performance in the modern sense. It's not something you watch and judge. It's something you participate in, something that happens among you rather than at you. Someone else has brought out a fiddle, a crude thing, homemade, but it produces sound, and that's enough. Someone is tapping a rhythm on an overturned bucket. An old woman is clapping along, her timing slightly off but her enthusiasm undimmed. And people are singing. Not everyone, not all at once, but voices rising and falling, joining the melody when they know the words, humming along when they don't. The songs are old, older than anyone alive, passed down through generations, changed slightly with each passing, but recognizable still. Songs about love and loss, songs about work and rest, songs about the turning of the seasons, songs that don't mean anything in particular but feel good to sing. You find a spot at the edge of the gathering and sit down on the grass. Your wife settles beside you. Children are running between the adults, playing their own games, occasionally stopping to listen before racing off again. This is leisure, not entertainment consumed passively from a screen, not distraction engineered to capture your attention and sell it to advertisers. Just people being together, making sound together, filling the evening hours with something that isn't work. How often did this happen? More often than you might think. The medieval calendar was punctuated with holidays, holy days, far more than the modern calendar. Sundays were mandatory rest days, enforced by the church. Work was forbidden, or at least strongly discouraged. Beyond Sundays, there were dozens of saints' days throughout the year, each one an excuse to stop working. Christmas wasn't a single day, but a season stretching nearly 2 weeks. Easter brought its own extended celebration. Local saints, regional traditions, harvest festivals, midsummer observances. The calendar was thick with reasons to rest. Historians have calculated that medieval English peasants might have had somewhere between 150 and 200 days per year when they weren't expected to work. The numbers vary by region and period, and not every holiday meant complete rest. But the pattern is clear. This was a culture that built leisure into its structure, not as a reward for productivity, but as a fundamental part of how life was organized. And what did people do with that leisure? They did this. They gathered. They made music. They told stories. They played games. They drank ale and talked about nothing important. They spent time with each other in ways that had no economic value whatsoever. The music shifts. Someone has started a dance tune, faster and more rhythmic, and a few people are getting to their feet. A young couple first, then another, then a group of children who don't know the steps but don't care. The dancing is simple, nothing like the elaborate court dances of the nobility. Just bodies moving to rhythm, feet stamping the packed earth of the village green, hands clapping, voices whooping encouragement. You don't join the dancing. You're tired, and you're not as young as you used to be. But you watch, and there's pleasure in watching. The young couple is showing off a little, spinning faster than strictly necessary. The children are inventing their own moves, chaotic and joyful. The old woman who was clapping has somehow ended up in the middle, shuffling her feet in a way that suggests she was quite the dancer 50 years ago. This is community, not an abstract concept, not a marketing term, but a lived reality. These are people you've known your whole life. You've worked beside them, argued with them, celebrated with them, mourned with them. You've watched their children grow up. You've helped bury their dead. Your lives are woven together so tightly that separating them would be like trying to untangle threads that have been twisted together for generations. The dance winds down. People are laughing, breathing hard, settling back onto the grass. Someone produces a jug of ale and it starts making the rounds. You take a drink when it reaches you, pass it to your wife, who passes it on. As the sky darkens, the conversation shifts. The music has stopped for now, and in the quiet, someone starts telling a story. It's an old story, one you've heard before. Everyone has heard it before, but that's not the point. The point is the telling. The point is the voice rising and falling in the gathering dusk, the faces lit by the last light of day, the children leaning in to listen even though they already know how it ends. The story is about a clever peasant who outwits a greedy lord. These stories are always popular, tales where the small and powerless use their wits to triumph over the big and powerful. The details change, the names change, but the structure is always the same. The Lord demands something impossible. The peasant finds a way to give it while still keeping what matters. Everyone laughs at the Lord's frustration. Justice is done, at least in the story. Is it subversive? Maybe. The feudal system that governs your life is not kind to peasants. The Lord owns the land. The Lord controls the mill and the oven and the court. The Lord can demand your labor, take a portion of your harvest, fine you for infractions real and imagined. You don't have much power in this system, not officially, but you have stories. And in stories, the peasant always wins. That matters. It matters more than you might think. Stories aren't just entertainment. They're how people make sense of their lives, how they preserve their dignity in systems designed to strip it away. The clever peasant in the story isn't just a character. He's an aspiration, a reminder that intelligence and courage can exist anywhere, that the people at the bottom of the hierarchy are still people. The story ends. People laugh, nod, murmur approval. Someone else starts another story, this one about a saint who performed miracles, and the mood shifts from mischievous to reverent. Religion and humor, faith and irreverence, they coexisted in medieval life in ways that might surprise us. The church was everywhere. It shaped the calendar, the morality, the worldview. But that didn't mean peasants were humorless automatons of piety. They joked about priests. They complained about tithes. They told bawdy stories that would make a modern person blush. Faith was real and deep, but it coexisted with all the other parts of being human. As the last light fades from the sky, the gathering begins to thin. Families with young children drift away first, heading home to put little ones to bed. Older people follow, tired from the day, ready for sleep. The young adults linger longer, talking in smaller groups, the outlines of flirtation visible even in the darkness. You and your wife stand, gather your children, start the short walk back to your cottage. The village is quieting around you. Doors are closing. Fires are being banked for the night. Animals are settling into their pens. But the evening isn't quite over. Back at the cottage, there's still work to be done. The eternal, inescapable work of maintaining a household. The animals need a final check. The fire needs tending. The children need settling. But there's also time. A small window between the gathering's end and sleep's beginning. Time for the family to be together in the close warmth of the cottage, the fire casting flickering shadows on the walls. Your wife is finishing some small task, mending a shirt, maybe, or preparing something for tomorrow. The children are playing quietly, their energy finally winding down after the day. You're sitting by the fire, staring into the flames, thinking about nothing in particular. This is the quietest part of the day, the part that happens after the work and the socializing, when the world contracts to just this room, just these people, just this moment. Someone says something, one of the children, asking a question. Your wife answers. A small conversation unfolds, the everyday exchange of family life. What happened today? What might happen tomorrow? The tiny details that seem insignificant but are actually the substance of existence. Maybe you tell a story of your own. Not one of the big stories from the green, but a smaller one. Something that happened to you when you were young. Something your father told you about his father. The family mythology that every family carries. The informal history that connects generations. The children listen, even though they've heard it before. Children like repetition. They like knowing what comes next. And stories told by firelight, in the safety of home, have a power that stories told elsewhere don't quite match. The fire crackles. The wind whispers against the thatch. Somewhere outside, an owl calls, hunting in the darkness. This is what community meant for your ancestors. Not just the public gatherings, the festivals, the shared labor, but also this, the private community of family. The people you live with, sleep beside, share every meal with. The faces you've seen every day of your life and will see every day until one of you dies. Modern life has made this kind of intimacy rare. We have our own rooms, our own schedules, our own screens. A family might live in the same house and barely see each other, their attention pulled in a dozen different directions. We've gained privacy, and privacy is valuable, genuinely valuable, but we've lost something too. The constant presence, the unavoidable togetherness, the knowledge that these people are your people and there's no escaping into solitude. For better or worse, your ancestors were stuck with each other, and that stuckness, that inescapable intimacy, created bonds we can barely imagine. The fire is burning low now. The children are yawning, rubbing their eyes. Your wife sets aside her mending and starts preparing for bed. The day, at last, is ending. You take a last look around the cottage. Everything is in its place. Everything is as it should be. Tomorrow will bring new work, new challenges, new small pleasures. But that's tomorrow. Tonight, there's just this. The warmth of the fire, the sound of breathing, the presence of the people who matter most. It's enough. The fire has burned down to embers now, glowing orange and red in the darkness, pulsing faintly like something alive. The cottage is warm, warmer than it will be by morning when the fire has faded further and the cold creeps back in. This is the best hour for sleeping, the hour when the day's heat is still trapped in the walls and the chill of night hasn't fully claimed the space. The children are already asleep, or nearly so. The younger ones went down easily, exhausted from a day of running and playing and helping with small tasks. The older ones fought it longer, as older children do, but eventually their eyes grew heavy and their protests faded into silence. Now they're curled together on the straw mattress, a tangle of small limbs and slow breathing. Your wife is finishing the last tasks of the night, banking the fire so it won't die completely before morning, setting aside the things that will be needed first thing, the pot for pottage, the bowls, the ladle, checking that the door is secured against wind and wandering animals. These small rituals are so familiar she could do them in complete darkness, and sometimes does. You're already on the bed, or what passes for a bed. The straw mattress has been yours for years, shaped by your body, familiar in its lumps and hollows. You've pulled a wool blanket over yourself, rough against your skin but warm. There's a pillow of sorts, a linen sack stuffed with feathers or straw or whatever was available when it was made. The mattress shifts as your wife lies down beside you. The children are on your other side, a wall of small warm bodies. In some households, the whole family sleeps in one bed. In others, children have their own sleeping area, maybe a smaller mattress or a pile of straw in the corner. The arrangements vary, but the principle is the same. Warmth is shared, bodies cluster together. No one sleeps alone if they can help it. This is how humans slept for most of history. Not in separate rooms, not in private cocoons of personal space, but together. The sounds of other people breathing, shifting, dreaming. These were the soundtrack of sleep. The warmth of other bodies was a resource, conserved and shared. Solitary sleep, the kind we consider normal today, would have seemed strange, even frightening, to your ancestors. The cottage is dark now, truly dark. The fire's glow provides just enough light to see shapes, outlines, the faint geometry of walls and rafters. No streetlights outside, no glowing screens, no digital clocks with their insistent numbers. Just darkness, the kind of darkness that modern people rarely experience. In this darkness, the other senses sharpen. You can hear the wind moving through the thatch above, a soft rustling sound. You can hear animals in their section of the cottage, the occasional shuffle of hooves, the contented sounds of creatures settling in for the night. You can hear the breathing of your family, each person's rhythm slightly different, a quiet symphony of life. And beyond the cottage walls, you can hear the night itself. An owl calling somewhere in the distance. A dog barking in another part of the village, answered by another dog, then silence. The rustle of small creatures moving through the grass. The vast, subtle soundscape of a world that hasn't been filled with engines and electronics. Your eyes are closed, but sleep doesn't come immediately. It rarely does. The transition from waking to sleeping is gradual, a slow loosening of the mind's grip on the day. Thoughts drift, fragments of conversation, images from the afternoon, half-formed plans for tomorrow. Nothing urgent, nothing demanding attention. Just the mind unwinding, releasing its hold on consciousness. This is another thing modern people have largely lost, the slow approach to sleep. We fill every moment until we can't stay awake any longer, then expect to drop into unconsciousness instantly. When that doesn't work, we call it insomnia, a disorder, a problem to be solved with pills or apps or white noise machines. Your ancestors knew something different. They knew that the border between waking and sleeping was meant to be crossed slowly, gently. They expected to lie in the darkness for a while, thinking, praying, simply existing in the quiet space between the day's end and sleep's beginning. And they knew something else, too, something we've almost completely forgotten. Sleep wasn't always a single block. Studies of pre-industrial sleep patterns, as well as historical records, suggest that for much of human history, people practiced what researchers call biphasic sleep or segmented sleep. You'd fall asleep after dark, sleep for a few hours, then wake in the middle of the night, not from insomnia, but naturally, as part of the normal rhythm. You'd lie awake for an hour or two, maybe more, then fall asleep again until dawn. This wakeful period in the middle of the night had a name. Historians have found references to first sleep and second sleep in documents going back centuries. The time between them was called the watching or simply the wake. It was a recognized part of the night, a normal feature of how humans experience darkness. What did people do during this wakeful period? They talked quietly with whoever was beside them. They prayed. Many prayer books from the medieval period include special prayers for the middle of the night. They thought about their dreams, which were fresh and vivid from the first sleep. They got up to tend the fire, check on animals, use the chamber pot. Some people made love, the quiet, unhurried intimacy of bodies finding each other in the darkness. This wasn't wasted time. It wasn't a problem to be solved. It was simply part of the night, as natural as the darkness itself. The expectation of 8 uninterrupted hours of sleep is a modern invention, shaped by artificial lighting and industrial work schedules. Your ancestors would have found it strange, maybe even unpleasant, to be unconscious for such a long, unbroken stretch. So as you lie here in the darkness, you're not expecting sleep to claim you immediately and hold you until dawn. You're expecting something more fluid, more forgiving. Sleep will come and go. Wakefulness will come and go. The night will pass in waves, and by morning you will have rested, even if that rest wasn't continuous. The first sleep is coming now. You can feel it approaching, a heaviness in your limbs, a softening of thought. The sounds of the cottage are fading, growing distant, becoming part of a dream that hasn't quite started yet. Your last conscious thoughts are small ones. The fence is fixed. The children are healthy. The harvest is still months away. Tomorrow will be another day, much like today, and that's not a bad thing. That's just life. And then you're asleep. The night passes. At some point, you don't know when, there's no clock to tell you, you surface into wakefulness. Not suddenly, not with alarm, just a gradual return to consciousness in the darkness. The fire has died down to almost nothing, just a faint glow you can barely see. The cottage is colder now. You pull the blanket tighter, press closer to the warm body beside you. You lie there for a while, awake but not alert. Thoughts move slowly through your mind. Fragments of a dream you were having, already fading. The sound of wind outside, stronger now than it was earlier. A sense of the night as a vast space surrounding your small shelter. Maybe you pray. A simple prayer, nothing elaborate. Words you've said so many times they come without thinking. Thanks for the day. Hopes for tomorrow. Acknowledgement of powers greater than yourself. Maybe you just lie there, existing in the darkness, feeling the rise and fall of breathing around you. This is the watching hour. The hour between first sleep and second sleep. The hour that modern life has eliminated, paved over with artificial light and the expectation that night should be unconscious from start to finish. Your ancestors knew this hour. They lived in it, week after week, year after year. They knew its particular quality, the stillness, the depth, the sense of being alone and together at the same time. They didn't fear it or fight it. They accepted it as part of what it meant to be human in a world shaped by darkness. Eventually, the second sleep comes. Your eyes close again. Your thoughts dissolve. The night continues its slow rotation, carrying you toward morning. And then, gradually, light. Not sudden light. Not an alarm. Just the slow seeping of gray into the darkness. The world reassembling itself one shade at a time. The rooster crows somewhere outside. The animals are stirring. A child shifts beside you, mumbles something, settles back into sleep. Another day is beginning. You lie there for a moment, suspended between sleep and waking, feeling the familiar weight of the blanket, the familiar warmth of bodies beside you. The fire needs tending. The animals need feeding. The work will resume, as it always does. But not yet. Not quite yet. For this one moment, you're allowed to simply exist. To be a human being in a human body, waking to another day of human life. The same way your parents woke, and their parents before them, stretching back through generations beyond counting. This is what a day in the life of a medieval peasant actually looked like. Not the dramatic events, the plagues and famines and wars that fill the history books. Just an ordinary day. Waking, working, eating, resting, gathering, talking, sleeping. The endless repetition that made up most of actual human existence. It wasn't easy. Let's be clear about that. The work was hard. The food was monotonous. The dangers were real. Disease, injury, hunger. The thousand small catastrophes that could destroy a family's security in days. Life expectancy was lower than ours. Infant mortality was devastating. A bad harvest could mean a bad year. A series of bad harvests could mean death. And yet there was something in this life that we've lost. Something our bodies still remember even if our minds have forgotten. The rhythm of it. The way work and rest flowed into each other, neither consuming the whole day. The long summer evenings with nothing scheduled. The deep winter nights with nothing to do but sleep and talk and wait for spring. The community of it. The constant presence of other people. The web of relationships that held the village together. The knowledge that your neighbors would help you when you needed it because you had helped them when they needed it. The slowness of it. The absence of the relentless acceleration that defines modern life. No one was optimizing their day. No one was trying to squeeze more productivity out of each hour. Time moved at the pace of seasons and sunlight, not clocks and calendars. The groundedness of it. The connection to land and weather and the fundamental processes of growing food and raising animals. You knew where your bread came from because you planted the grain and ground the flour and shaped the dough with your own hands. We've gained so much since then. Medicine that actually works. Freedom from backbreaking labor. Food security that your ancestors couldn't have imagined. Opportunities for education, for travel, for self-invention that would have seemed like magic to a medieval peasant. But we've lost something too. And maybe, lying here in the darkness of the modern world, listening to whatever sounds fill your own night, you can feel the shape of that loss. The hollow place where community used to be. The restlessness that comes from days without natural rhythm. The strange exhaustion of having infinite choices and no time to enjoy any of them. Your ancestors worked hard, but they also rested. They had less, but they needed less. Their world was smaller, but it was full of people they knew and trusted. Their lives were shorter, but they were lived in deep connection to the earth, the seasons, and each other. There's no going back, and you probably wouldn't want to, not really, not when you consider the disease, the danger, the lack of everything that makes modern life comfortable. But there's something to learn from looking back. Something to remember about what human life can be when it's shaped by different rhythms. The sun is rising now, wherever you are. Another day is beginning, with all its demands and distractions. In a moment, you'll have to engage with it. Return to whatever work and worry fills your hours. But for now, just for this moment, you can lie still. You can breathe. You can feel the weight of your own body, the miracle of being alive, the strange gift of consciousness that lets you imagine a life centuries removed from your own. Your ancestors are with you, not literally, but in some deeper sense. In the shape of your face, which carries echoes of faces that have been gone for hundreds of years. In the rhythms of your body, which still respond to light and darkness in patterns established before history began. In the questions you ask about meaning and purpose and how to live a good life. Questions that humans have been asking since the first fire was kindled and the first story was told. They survived so that you could exist. Generation after generation, through famine and plague and war and every other catastrophe history could throw at them. They kept going, kept working, kept having children, kept passing down the spark of life that eventually became you. That's quite a legacy to carry. But you don't have to carry it consciously. It's already in you, woven into every cell, every thought, every breath. So rest now. Let the day wait a moment longer. Let the world spin without your attention for just a few more breaths. The medieval peasant whose day we followed is long gone, dust and memory and scattered descendants. But something of their life continues. In you, in everyone who pauses, even briefly, to wonder what it was like before all this. Before the noise and the speed and the endless demands on our attention. They knew something we've forgotten. Maybe, in the quiet moments, we can remember it too. Sleep well.